Anybody out there been around teenagers? Anyone been a teenager? Attitude. Tons of it. I remember as a kid growing up, my parents would say, go to your room and fix your attitude. Go to your room till you learn how to act. And I'd go to my room and I'd be in there for a while, and then I'd step out into the hallway and I'd say, to be or not to be. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in my room. Attitude. That obviously was not what they were talking about. But oftentimes when we talk about attitude, we don't give a really good definition of what it means to have an attitude or how to change an attitude. So here's some things that I've learned. So in I think it was 1983, I went to New York for the first time. And I was going to an NAACP convention, and so this was like one of my first airplane rides, and I was just so excited to take this trip. And so we're approaching New York, and the pilot gets on the loudspeaker and says, if you look out your left side window, at 17,000 feet, you'll see the Statue of Liberty. And so I look out the window, and I don't see the Statue of Liberty. But that's okay, because I know that we're going to come back. So on the way back, I'll be able to see it. So I go to New York. I have a great time at the convention. Just learn lots of folks, lots of things, and meet lots of new folks, and all sorts of stuff. And on the way back, I make sure that I get a seat on the plane so I can sit by the window. So this time, as we're leaving, I can see the Statue of Liberty. And the pilot gets on the loudspeaker, we're leaving, and he says, if you look out your right side window, you'll see the Statue of Liberty. And so I look out my window, and I don't see the Statue of Liberty. I have a bad attitude. Okay, we'll come back to that story in just a second. So let's talk about this attitude thing. What is this attitude thing, and why is this important? All right. So my father was my pastor. Growing up, church was a big part of our lives, and I remember an instance where I would ask to borrow the car from my father, and it would be Friday night, and I'd say, Dad, can I borrow the car? And because my dad loved me, what would my father say to my request? He would say yes. And so he would say yes, and so I would say that my father had what kind of an attitude? A good or positive attitude, right? And consequently, what kind of attitude would my father say that I had? He would say that I also had a good or positive attitude. Now, I mentioned that my father was my pastor, and so on Sunday, we would go to church from 7 a.m. for Sunday school to about 11:30 p.m. At the end of night service. We'd stop at 3 o'clock for chicken, not because we're black, but because we thought chicken was delicious. So we went to church all day, and I recall a particular time when one of my friends, my friend Dexter, called and said, Andre, we're going to go to the movies. Can you come pick me up? Now, I know we have church all day, but this was a special movie. It was The Two Jakes, featuring Jack Nicholson. Don't go see it. At any rate, so I sheepishly walk up to my dad, and I say, Dad, can I use the car? And what does my father say? No! You know we have church. Yeah, I knew we had church, but I thought it was worth a chance. But I say my dad has what kind of an attitude? A bad or negative attitude. And consequently, I respond to him, and he would say that I also have a bad or negative attitude. So what is it that determines the attitude? Now, most popularly, people will say that an attitude is some kind of emotional response. That an attitude is the way you interpret the emotional environment to your pleasure or not. Right? That's what typically people would say. Well, I'd like to offer you two new ways to think about an attitude. First of all, when we talk about aeronautics, right, the study of flight, there are two concepts that are extremely important to understand. The first is how high things are from the ground is called the what? Altitude. Now, altitude has a cousin, and the cousin's name is attitude. So altitude is how high you are from the ground, and attitude is the pitch at which a plane is directed. So that's the first concept. So it's the direction that you lean to or from something. So an attitude is the direction you lean. Now, the second part of a new way of thinking about an attitude is the fact that when I asked my father for the car and he said yes, I had a good attitude. When my father said no, I had a bad attitude. So what is the second part of the definition of an attitude? It is whether you get what you want or not. So the first part is a direction that you lean to something or away from something according to your goal. When you get what you want, when you reach your goal, you have a good or positive attitude. When you don't get what you want, you have a negative or bad attitude, leaning to or from what your goal is. So all the time that I was growing up, and my parents and teachers would say, boy, you need to fix your attitude. What they were really saying to me was that I need to change my goal. When you change your goal, you change your attitude. How many times have you been in situations where you couldn't change the situation you were in? You couldn't change your family. You couldn't change your job. You couldn't change even your physical body. But one thing that you can change, that changes your whole outlook on life, is to change your goal.